Hello, and welcome to the Spec Shaman Podcast, a show that explores the world of building product manufacturers, architects, and engineers, sustainable design, and technology and trends. We engage in thought-provoking discussions with renowned experts, industry pioneers, and visionaries who are making a significant impact in the construction industry. Join us as we explore groundbreaking ideas, revolutionary concepts, and the latest advancements shaping the built environment. The Spec Shaman Podcast is hosted by Laura Elliott, the lead instructional designer at Ron Blank & Associates. Laura is a seasoned interviewer with a passion for uncovering the untold stories behind success. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to the Spec Shaman Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Elliott, and I am joined today by David Price, Executive Manager of Business Development at Camden Door Controls. Hi, David. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Laura, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Yes, you were brought to us by SPC Alliance, and this is part of the SPC Alliance podcast series. So we're excited to get you here and to get into some of these really great topics on access control and door hardware and to learn your origin story. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
I'm I hate to say it, a 40-year veteran in the industry, having worked for a number of manufacturers, having my own advertising agency in a number of different roles. So really worked for installation companies, for distribution companies, worked with consulting engineers. My first positions in the industry were in the spec market, in the new construction market. So.
Well, and that's great. I can imagine that having worn a couple of different hats throughout your career, you've learned a lot about the built environment. Is there anything that sticks out to you?
I think the most interesting thing to me about it is very few people have the opportunity to actually have actually been embedded in a product development, product engineering department, and then actually go through the process of releasing those products to market in marketing communications and supporting them through sales activities such as trade shows and client meetings and all of that, supporting it with customer service and technical support. And really closing the loop, really everything from initiating a new potential product launch all the way through to being on the phone and working with tech support reps as they're answering questions that are coming back from customers. And I think that's a very unique skill set, a very valuable skill set, because it really flatlines that gap that exists between customers, spec writers, in the case of your audience, and the manufacturers, and really gives a very unique perspective on the market and on being what it takes to be a successful manufacturer. And I think the key to that is removing the wall or the gap that exists between the manufacturer and people that specify products.
Yeah, I have a profound appreciation for the different corners of the industries that serve the built environment and the communicators that stand between them. It's quite the symphony when you're working with sales and engineering and design and specification. I imagine that from your bird's eye view of the industries over the last 40 years, you've seen a great deal of change.
I really have, and nothing more than the massive change in digital information technology. Of course, I hate to say it, but my first job in the industry after college was I got a desk and I got a secretary. I didn't actually type my own correspondence and such. That was all kind of done by the office pool. And I just walked in one day and there was a computer on my desk and a lot of training to get up to speed. And when we look now, digital communication is everywhere. And having as you say, just an absolute profound effect. It's just nothing like it was before, which means that those silos that used to exist, here's the manufacturer, here's the installer, here's the specifier. Those walls are really tumbling. And of course, the pace of business is much different now as well.
And as those walls fall, people have to be prepared. I think.
Having worked as a manager of an installation company, having worked as the marketing manager for distribution and manufacturing companies, really am seeing that very much.
Yeah, I can't imagine. So let's focus in a little bit on your current specialty. How has door hardware evolved related to systems and devices that support access control?
That difference between access control and entrance systems is it's not those are not terms. The entrance system term is not one that's known widely in the industry, and that is entrance systems are really designed primarily to make entrance and egress easier particularly for persons with disabilities, but for the general public as well. In other words, we want to make that door opening easier to access. Whereas access control is all about limiting or restricting the access of the movement through an opening. So we really want to be very clear about those two very, very different requirements, because that has a profound impact on the design and the functionality of the product. You certainly don't want to take a device that's designed for limiting access and use that as part of an entrance system that is encouraging or making it easier for people to use an opening.
Those two categories, I'm sure, inspire a lot of great design and engineering.
There's products and innovation within those two categories that are really very, very important right now. Hot buttons, if you will. The first one I could mention would be wireless systems. We're now seeing, where in the past wireless systems typically did not work very well. It required batteries every few months and had spotty reception. The new class of wireless products that we're seeing on the market right now have up to 4 years of battery life, have a performance consistency that's very similar to wired products. And of course, wireless gives you an ability to dramatically, and when I say dramatically, you can cut your installation costs by 40%, 50%, in some cases, much more, because if you have to do trenching or running conduit through concrete walls, that kind of thing, then the cost of running wires gets to be really, really expensive in a retrofit situation. But even in new construction, avoiding having to run wires is a pretty big opportunity. There is now new wireless systems on the market that don't even require batteries anymore. We have new power harvesting type of wireless transmitters that use the energy of actually pushing a push plate switch or a push button to generate an electrical pulse that would then transmit a wireless signal from the transmitter to a receiver. We've seen cases where these new power harvesting no battery type of wireless switches have a wireless range that's equal to a battery powered wireless system. But as I was saying earlier, even the battery powered wireless systems are just a completely different animal than they used to be back 10 years ago. We're seeing now 4-year battery life for a wall switch transmitter, for a push plate transmitter, for example.
How is that accomplished?
It really comes down to the very low power consumption that's required for wireless. It really has become microamps of power, and the actual wireless communication, and particularly here I'm speaking about frequency hopping or multi-band wireless transmission. Those protocols have become much more sophisticated, and frankly, we just learn more as we do more, and the technology is getting perfected on an increasing basis, getting better and better all the time.
Yeah, I think that's worth announcing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, anyone who hasn't looked at wireless over, as I say, over the last 5 years particularly, but over the last 10 years, I really encourage them to look at that, where there's particularly where there is a new construction, where there is an impediment to running wires from point A to point B.
How does that work for historic spaces, like retrofitting?
Retrofit is where the wireless technology is being applied the most. We are seeing in new construction, you see wireless a lot when I say you have to, when there be a requirement for trenching just for the access control system or the entrance system. You don't want to pay any more money for that than you absolutely need to. So if you've got a switch on a bullard outside the building, for example, rather than running a trench and running wires to that bullard, wireless is an excellent opportunity. In retrofit, we're seeing a lot of manual type of switches being changed over to touchless switches, and in those cases, you can certainly use wireless as a very quick answer in a retrofit application.
That's very cool. So are there any innovations that we're seeing with access control and entrance systems that are important today?
We've been talking about wireless as a very important new technology for the industry. Another one is touchless. COVID is not in the rearview mirror. As system designers know, we still need to reduce the spread of germs where it is financially reasonable to do that. And so wireless technology is seeing a lot of investment right now in different types of sensor technology, and also in the number and types of products that are available to reduce the amount of times that a building occupant needs to press a button or press a manually activated device in order to move around the building. So I've been very involved in that side of the market for particularly over the last 5 years. Another big part of the innovation that's in the industry really has to do with locking products and how those locking products are being reduced in price, but also how they're increasing in functionality. Right now on electric strikes, preload performance is a very important factor. And for those who are listening who don't know what preload is, it is a difference in pressure between the inside and outside of a building caused by air pressure or by simply somebody pressing on the door that pushes the latch of the lock set against the keeper of a strike. Anyone in the know is familiar with preload on an electric strike will actually jam it. It will actually prevent it from operating. And that's not particular to a brand of electric strikes, generally any strike on the market, ANSI strike or otherwise on the market. If you push the door latch against that keeper, then the strike will bind. The new generation of electric strikes with preload means that you can have up to 20 pounds of pressure on the against the keepers of the strike, and the strike will not bind. So we are seeing a big segmentation, a big dividing line now. I think if you look back in another 5 years from now, you'll see preload and post preload electric strikes, and eventually, I'd say certainly within the next 5 years, I don't think you'll see an electric strike that doesn't have preload performance on it, because again, the technology is becoming simpler, more. When I simpler, I'm really referring to the patents that are protecting that that particular feature. Their manufacturers are becoming more innovative in how they're actually achieving that, and you're now seeing more and more manufacturers bring out products with preload in them.
That's really cool. And you know what I really appreciate is that you broke down what it means for those that don't know. I think sometimes there's an assumption that people understand the actual mechanisms that you all work with regularly. So it's really helpful. And in that vein, could you help to explain the difference between access control and entrance control systems and how they interconnect in product designs?
Absolutely. So access control is all about restricting the access of building occupants through a door, egress or entrance. And entrance systems are all about making that movement easier, particularly for persons with disability, but also for other building occupants as well. A great example of the difference between those two markets, the access control market and the entrance system market, or the door automatic door market, can be found in wireless key fobs. In the access control market, you have key fobs which have buttons that are not easily pressed, because you don't want somebody actually pressing a button to enter if they're walking by the door and they happen to hit it by accident. You certainly don't want that. So the actual design of a key fob is very different. On the entrance system side, we have key fobs with raised buttons, because we want to make it so that a person with disability can use a fob with a closed fist. So the design will be very, very different. And the receivers are quite different as well. On the access control side, we want to keep track of every single person that's going through that door. We have each user is assigned a code, and we can track their movements through a building. On the entrance system side, or the automatic door side, we're not really interested in keeping track of who's going through the door. We just want to make it easy. So the receiver, it's not a wireless receiver where you would have a Wiegand output to an access control system and all that sophisticated electronics and software application. You would have a very, very simple code on a fob that would then go to a receiver, and that receiver would just open or close a relay. Very, very different types of products depending on those two types of systems.
And this has got a diversified set of applications, I think, across the board that's growing as well. So I do want to focus a little bit on privacy and restroom control systems. How have they changed over the past decade? What have you seen?
Well, the whole restroom control or privacy type systems really, I don't believe were really on anybody's radar up until probably around 2010, somewhere in that neighborhood. So it is a fairly recent, in the grand, when you consider that access control systems have been around for hundreds of years, well over 100 years now. Restroom control or privacy systems are very recent development. And this is mostly, I would say virtually all, driven due to the emerging requirements for ADA support of persons with a disability. So as the ANSI standards have changed around universal restrooms and restroom design and other types of ADA requirements, you're now seeing an increase in the sophistication and the availability from multiple manufacturers, restroom control systems that simply are new to the industry. They weren't here even 5 years ago now.
It's definitely a rapidly growing market with a good impetus behind it.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing to me about it is that although restroom control privacy systems are being driven by the new requirements, the new ADA requirements for universal restroom design, the application, these types of systems are it's very easy to apply these systems in other applications. A big one that we see is nursing rooms. So nursing mothers have an ability to have privacy. Well, the low cost and the availability of that type of a system is really being driven because restroom control is being applied in so many other applications. It really is the volume is also driving other types of privacy systems, which is very interesting to watch. First we solve a problem that we know we have, and then the way we solve the problem tends to, in this case, is giving impetus to other applications, other needs that are kind of ancillary to the main opportunity or the main requirement.
I love that. In research, we used to call that intended and unintended consequences.
Absolutely unintended. But
Yeah.
again, I'm happy that very happy to see these types of systems are really. It's all about, to me. It's all about being in service of the building occupant, and whether that person has disabilities or doesn't. I believe that our obligation as manufacturers and system specifiers is to serve those building occupants to the best of our ability.
Well, there's no greater mission. So could you help those that don't understand, what exactly do you mean when you say restroom control system?
Absolutely. I became involved in restroom control systems in 2015 when there was an amendment to the Ontario, Canada building code. This was the first time in any jurisdiction in North America mandated not only that restroom control systems were going to be applied on universal restrooms in the province of Ontario. It also mandated the occupancies where those universal restrooms were going to be installed, and even to the point of mandating that there would be a universal restroom in every three stories of a commercial building. I became involved in restroom control systems in 2015 when the Ontario, Canada building code mandated automatic doors on restrooms in hospitals and other places where you would expect it, but even at commercial buildings. And on one of the requirements was a universal washroom installed on every 3 floors of a commercial building, which is quite extensive. A restroom control system has a number of different parts. First and most important thing is that we're putting a lock, an electrified lock, on the restroom door. These are single occupancy restrooms. We're talking about multiple occupancy restrooms. A lot of those restrooms don't even have doors. If you go to a movie theater, for example, a cinema, you'll walk into a common multi-person restroom. That's not the restroom control application that we're talking about. We're specific to single occupancy restrooms. The first thing we're going to do is put an electric strike or a mag lock on that door to allow the occupant of the restroom to be able to have security and privacy. We need some form of activation for that to happen. We have to tell the striker, the mag lock, how to close, and we need to do that for both locking the door. We have to tell the system, okay, lock the door now. We also have to tell the system when we're ready to leave. We need to tell the system to open the door. So there's activation involved, and there's a lot of options in terms of the activation. It could be a manual switch, it could be touchless, it could be a combination of touchless and low touch type of switch. Enunciation is really important, but surprisingly, enunciation is not part of the Ontario Building Code. Or the National Building Code. When I talk about enunciation, what I'm really speaking about is if you walk up to a restroom and you try and you press the push plate switch to open the door and it doesn't open. If you don't enunciate the status of either the restroom being occupied or the locked status of the restroom, then nobody will really know why that restroom door didn't open. Is that a service? Is it closed? Is somebody in there? So we believe that, or I certainly believe that doing occupied when lit indication or locked when lit indication is very, very important.
Are there other key considerations when you're designing access controls and entrance systems?
I think the relay logic controller is fundamentally important. If you have a small relay controller that goes in the header of the automatic door operator, and it's low cost and it has the functionality that you need, that's infinitely better than having to do this kind of control with a more sophisticated access control system. There's no need to have to spend any more money on this type of thing than you need to, and you can do that very simply with a small relay controller that costs about $60 and not spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars for an access control system. And the other is that the relay logic control, if it's already pre-programmed with the functionality that you need, well, that reduces the installer costs tremendously. And it also has a tie-in for other systems as well. One of the requirements that's in the Ontario Building Code that's not in any other jurisdiction that we've seen is the additional requirement for an emergency call system. That is to say that the Ontario Building Code requires a push button, a request for assistance push button, and AV devices inside and outside the restroom in the case that someone has an emergency. And if that's going to happen, if you have a emergency call system and you have somebody in the restroom that is in a crisis situation, you certainly want to make sure that that restroom door is opened automatically the minute that they hit that press for assistance button. And if and that kind of functionality is not something that you would necessarily do unless you were very, very familiar with these different types of systems and how they all relate together.
Though it's curious because I know that hospitals have those distress features in restrooms where you can pull a cord and it
Absolutely.
will bring a nurse.
And very important in those applications. But I think what you need to recognize is that the hospitals and other healthcare facilities are supervised. They have staff that will immediately respond to those. But in a commercial building, you may not have anyone. It probably is an announcement to the general public. You probably don't have anyone that's actually on scene that can respond or knows how to respond quickly. So it is somewhat problematic.
It might require a little bit of a policy adjustment for practicality.
I think it's a wonderful idea. I question the payoff for it. That is to say, how many lives are being, how is life being extended, or how many lives are being saved by the requirement for emergency call systems in restrooms.
Well, and you might be able to troubleshoot some sort of personal wireless connection. It's making an assumption that everyone would have a wireless device that would be their own. But
we're certainly speaking of that, in regards to entrance systems, and we do persons with disability, particularly a wheelchair. Someone in a wheelchair is very often, if they're in a building, certainly as an employee or otherwise, they are going to have a wireless fob Velcro to the wheelchair, which they can then use to enter a building or a room, a facility in a building.
What are the key features of leadership in the access controls and entrance systems market?
I believe it is looking at being able to bring new knowledge leadership to the table. Let's be clear, nobody needs another device. Nobody needs another push button or another strike or another system. That's the same as all the others. The industry needs, on a continuous basis, it needs to look for better value. That is products that cost less and do more. Products that have technology and solutions that have new technology that will allow you to do something you haven't been able to do before. Or as we were talking about with preload, being able to overcome a problem that's inherent in the design of existing products. So that's really key. But the other side of that also ties in a little bit to what we were talking about with restroom control systems, in that you have to be able to respond quickly to what's happening in the market. And I think that that's where being small and nimble, being able to not always be chasing the large product volume opportunities, is so important.
Yeah, and thought leadership, I think, is a big deal in this market specifically. I mean, I think it's a big deal everywhere, right? But I think that there's a balance between innovation and practicality that is really profound here.
Yes.
Are there some good strategies that thought leaders can use for the electric strike market?
Again, I think that the biggest issue is not simply being another Me Too manufacturer or another Me Too solution provider. If you're going to represent yourself in the marketplace, I think you have to represent doing things better, doing things less expensively, doing things that provide, as we were talking about earlier, ultimately we're in service to building occupants. That's why we're here. And if we're not actually bringing substance to that, then I don't think you have a place in the market. I think your reason for being has to be based on that movement forward and that evolution. And we are seeing evolutions in the industry, those evolutions moving forward and participating, not as sweeping the broom, but as with actual knowledge leadership, with something innovative and valuable. You can have technology, but if it, as you mentioned, if it's too expensive, it's not practical. If it's too hard to use, it's not practical. It has to be the right form of. It has to be in the right shape of form and function.
That nexus is really important. Is that how you address the challenges posed by market dominance of a few manufacturers?
To my thinking, this is a really fundamentally important question, because we have seen such tremendous consolidation. We talked about my 40 some odd years in the industry, and the number of small to mid-sized manufacturers over that time frame is unbelievable. There are very few smaller manufacturers now compared to what we had a number of years ago, and I think that consolidation is continuing, and I don't believe that that's necessarily in the best interest of the marketplace. I'm sure it's in the best interest of some shareholders, but I don't know if that's in the best interest of the specifying community and building owners.
Well, it's like a universal theme, right? Like the band is good when they're independent and nobody knows about them, and then they hit that mid-range point where like enough people know about them, but you're still kind of cool because not everybody does, and then and then they get big, and you're like, oh, they're ruined.
Well,
You know.
If you're looking at the status quo, then I would certainly look for a large, multinational conglomerate. That's where you're probably going to get the best quality and price. But if you're looking for emerging markets, serving new opportunities in the market.
Yeah, and I think, well, my hope would be that there would be space for everyone, right?
I
know,
agree absolutely with that statement. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that as long as we create a balance and not a hegemon, there's everyone will benefit from the different aspects. So when we're looking at cool ideas and innovative products that meet market needs, are there any that stick out?
Well, we've been talking about restroom control systems, being automated occupancy detection. So, why do you need to actually hit a switch, whether it's a a touchless switch or manual switch? Why do you actually have to activate a switch to let the system know that there's an occupant in the restroom? Well, we can do that with the occupancy detection, which would then eliminate that, or provide manual switches as kind of a standby in case the main sensor didn't go. That's certainly one. We also want to make installation easier. So rather than running 12 wires between the controller and multiple devices, can we run a 2-wire bus around the restroom and eliminate all that wiring? That would be a great requirement as well. And then, of course, there's the writers of codes and standards are now implementing new requirements as well. So there are continuous updates in universal restroom design that need to be accommodated. And one of those that comes to mind very quickly is a requirement for Braille instructional signage in restroom control systems. So that's not currently mandated anywhere, but you can certainly see it coming.
That's a good thing. It's kind of wild that it's not already integrated. So that's good that they're taking those steps. When you look at, I know we touched on this earlier, but the legacy that COVID left and that's influencing the future of access controls and entrance systems, do you notice any shifts?
I'm very surprised that we are seeing that the market demand for touchless products is reduced. It's not gone away by any means. It's still certainly well above historical norms, but nothing like it was during those few years of lockdown, where we saw just a massive change. And we saw universities literally changing thousands and thousands of manual switches, changing those to touchless switches. Well, that urgent requirement certainly not happening anymore. I think that the use of touchless switches is continuing continuing to grow, but not anywhere near that height of the pandemic situation that we saw, which is surprising to me. I would have thought that that there would be a reluctance to go back to virtually any kind of manual switch, but we're certainly selling as many manual switches today as we sold before, and then selling touchless switches on top of that. So
growth in both spaces.
Growth in both spaces, exactly.
How does consumer feedback inform product development in this way?
Again, we spoke of the advantages of being small and nimble. Smaller companies just inherently have a connection to the market that it seems to be very, very difficult for larger companies. I think it's primarily because the key executive in most companies, in larger companies, simply they don't talk to the marketplace the way that the executive and key managers of smaller companies do. I work for a privately held company, and I can tell you the owners of the company are in touch with specification writers and building owners and installers almost every day of the week. And they don't just manage the company; they're actively involved in working with the constituents in the market to make sure that they're getting the right product at the right price, and with the right amount of support. And in large companies, you have this thing called voice of customer. You have this, again, kind of a wall that exists, or a gap that exists between the marketplace and the executives in the company, and they rely on surveys, and they rely on business consultants and market consultants to tell them, what's going on. Well, in a small company, there's no gap. The person who's going to make the decision about spending $500,000 on a new product is sitting across the table from the installer, or sitting across the table from the building owner, or the specifying engineer, specification writer. Sorry.
Well, those guys are important.
We like specification writers.
Let's call them right. I have a great respect for specification writers. They're lovely people, all of them. So let's pivot a little bit and look at some case studies. Are there any that you can share that kind of highlight the success of access control systems and how they improve user experience?
The big one that comes to mind is back during COVID, where we saw a number of university campuses changing all of their manual activation switches, push buttons, for touchless push buttons. One application, I think there was 1,500 doors that a university had to change, felt they needed to change, and that's pretty amazing. That kind of very rapid change over to touchless. But I think the biggest thing is not a specific application or a simple solution or a single solution, but how manufacturers are bringing a range of solutions to the table that allow a system specifier to choose, not just be given a solution, but to be able to choose between multiple solutions based on their specific project needs, based on parameters for pricing or sophistication of installation. There's really that option of the ability to have options instead of just being given a single solution. I think is very, very important, and we're seeing that more and more as we go on. And as I said before, do understand that no one needs another electric strike or hands-free switch or a door controller. We need products that are less expensive to install and provide better service to building occupants. A great case in point for that would be our 36-inch tall push plate switches, which were introduced back a few years ago. The emerging building code requirement for a push plate switch to be placed at hand height and at the height of a foot of a wheelchair demanded what's known in the industry as high-low switches. And so you have one surface mount, very easy to install push plate switch that covers the building code requirements for a high-low switch. But there's a lot of innovation that we brought to that product over the last 5 years and are continuing to bring out over time. For example, now bringing out a switch that's only 4.5 inches wide, much narrower and therefore less obtrusive. Also falling into the requirement for 75 millimeter activation. There's also a new code requirement for a 75 millimeter wide activation plate as part of that column switch. So we're actually changing that activation plate to be a little bit wider to meet that new code requirement. So not only can the column switch be installed from top loading, that is to say the actuation bar is slid into the body of the column switch from the top, a side loading column switch, so you don't have to worry if someone puts a hand dryer above the column switch in a restroom application, you can still be able to service the product with a side loading product. And that's just some of the very quick examples of how things are changing.
So a primary goal of this podcast is to build a catalog of wisdom for the industries that we serve. What is one piece of industry wisdom you would like to share with our audience in closing?
I think the most important thing is always to remember who we serve, the building occupants that we serve, and how we are obligated to bring new technology and new ways of looking at that service to the table. And I think that's where we bring value that is unique to each of us.
You're the first person to say anything like that. So, good answer. I only believe that as well. We all do a lot of things every day, and some of it is aimed at success, right? And some of it is aimed at progress. And I think if we remember the people at the heart of the built environment, I think it matters. And it definitely makes, products and projects of integrity. So,
and that's so, and it's so important on the manufacturing side, which I participate in. Is quite often what's the profitability, what's happening next quarter, and that's not the end run. That's not the objective.
Yeah. Making something worthwhile that helps people and lasts.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's service to persons with disabilities. It's about making a building more secure, providing more security for the people that are in that building. These are the touchstones that matter most.
I agree. Well, it's been a true pleasure to have you here today, David. Thank you for sharing your insight and your perspectives with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Spec Shaman Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our show and leave us a review. The Spec Shaman Podcast is produced by Laura Elliott and Brad Blank. A huge thank you to our guests who made this show possible. Building product manufacturers who want to increase their specification opportunities, please visit specshaman.com or ronblank.com. Thanks all for this episode, folks. See you next time.